Welcome to Roundhill Radio, the podcast from Roundhill Community Church. Through our conversations, we discover the holy and the ordinary, find moments of grace and peace, and redefine what we're talking about. We talk about faith. Hey, Ed.
Hey, Leslie.
And welcome, everybody, to Art Month.
Yes.
I've decided it is Art Month, and yay, verily, it is Art Month. We have called it Art Month because we have some exciting things coming up.
We do.
We have your exhibition. Mm-hmm. And my film, Gulp. I feel like we have similar levels.
No gulp about it.
Of trepidation. I'm very enthusiastic about your project. And
nervousness.
I feel like I'm receiving excitement from you about mine.
I'm incredibly excited about it.
Yeah, so we'll just share that excitement for each other and continue to be a little nervous about our own.
Well, I think we're making good use of the fact that thankfully, after nearly 3 years, the Les Beaux Art Gallery is opening at Roundhill Community Church.
It is.
And that gives us an opportunity to show an exhibition of art and you've created a film about it. So it's really given us a moment of opening to share some of these gifts and reawaken the centrality of the arts in the life of the congregation.
Absolutely. And we'll have a podcast interview with the curator of the Les Beaux Art Gallery next week for the podcast. Looking forward to that very much. And so we invite you, dear viewers and listeners, to join us, if you would like, on January 22nd at 4 p.m. here at Roundhill Community Church, if you're a local, for the exhibition opening and film premiere
debut
party. I think it's going to be a wonderful time. I've missed having that gallery.
Oh,
with something there.
It's a big emptiness.
It really is. It's what a treat to have such a wonderful space here that we get to walk through every day on our way to work.
Right.
It's amazing. So I'm looking forward so much to having that back alive again. This isn't your first exhibition.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you've done this a few times, but this is your first one here.
First one at the church at the Les Beaux Art Gallery. Yep. So
perfect.
Yeah.
That's exciting. Yeah. So I, like all ideas I find that end up coming to fruition, I don't remember whose idea it was or where the idea came from, but somehow I ended up making a mini documentary. It's one of those things you stop and pause when you're halfway through. Like, what? Why did I decide to do when you're editing at 11:30 at night? Like, I'm having a great time, but I'm not quite sure why I'm here.
Let that be your guide.
It was great. Just following, I'm trying to follow my enthusiasm.
It's been fun for me to see it in process.
Yes.
To see how I haven't seen the inner workings and the infrastructure, but I've seen how the pieces have come together.
Yes.
And you've got a gift for it.
Oh, thank you. Well, we'll see when it's done. It's not actually done. It's close. It's getting close. I'm no longer panicking that it would
Time
get done.
will literally tell.
It will tell. It'll be done at 4 p.m. on January 22nd.
There
is when
we
will
go.
It be done. But it's been such an interesting process, and we're going to talk more about that actually as the last episode of Art Month, because as part of the event, after we show the film, it's 15 minutes long, actually 16 minutes and 32 seconds, but who's counting? We're going to have a conversation about it, and we'll we will record that for the podcast for our friends who can't make it to in person to join us for that. That's going to be a lot of fun. But it got us thinking about art and faith, which are two words we like to bring together as often as possible here.
We do.
Especially on Roundhill Radio. We actually have a couple episodes called that already. This is a through thread we've enjoyed tugging at.
Yep.
So what is the role of art? I guess art in faith, but then also art in the church as a community of faith.
Well, there's a question. I think it's a wonderful question because it seems to me that art and faith have been connected from the very beginning. Right. And whether we conceive of art as storytelling and art as music and art as mark making and art as so many different expressions, poetry, it's been there from the get-go.
Right.
And I think that human beings have struggled to give expression to their feelings and their experience in the world and their hopes and their fears through art for many tens of thousands of years. We're seeing more and more evidence of that.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting to me that in the life of the church, so much of who we are and what we are is tied to artistic expression.
Yeah.
And we really depend on the arts for the fulfillment of our mission, for inspiration, to clarify our purpose, to express our emotions, all of that.
Yeah.
And I was thinking within the last couple of weeks of something I hadn't thought about for a long, long time. When I graduated from college, I lived for a summer in a really challenging urban housing area in just on the outskirts of Edinburgh, Scotland. 40,000 people, very, very deprived conditions. And so I worked with a minister there leading a youth camp for the summer. And by the time I arrived, he was creating this project in the church where he had basically pulled all of the pews out, created this open space, and he filled it with art.
Wow.
And so it was actually, I think, probably the first gallery I ever visited. And it was in this beleaguered church with this beaten down iron wrought fencing around it and grass that hadn't been mowed. And it just looked like it was really in disrepair. But when you walk through the doors, he'd created this beautiful gallery. I think he wanted to say to the community, there's beauty here. There's beauty here.
Right.
And art was a great way for him to say that. And then you think about all those years when artistic expression helped to communicate the stories of faith. If people couldn't read, they could see those stories played out on tapestries and stained glass and stone sculpture. I mean, it's like we will find any material that we can possibly get our hands on to tell the story and pass it along.
Right. Absolutely. To be creative. I feel like that creative expression. I was having a conversation with Shannon recently, our wonderful colleague, and she was being complimentary about something, which is very nice. But I said to her, I said, if I'm not creating, something's wrong. For me, creativity, I think I'm discovering that creativity and being able to express some sort of in whatever medium I'm working with that day, but being able to express myself to make something where there was not something before is like my fundamental self-care is what really like caring for my heart and my soul feels like. If I'm able to create something, if I'm able to work with my hands, work with my mind to just make something, like that to me feels like such a fundamental part of myself. And if I look around, I'm like, I haven't really done much in a while. You kind of look back, you're like, well, that, some stuff was happening.
Right.
I look back and it's such a fundamental thing. What do you think it is about art that is so helpful to the person making it?
Well, my own personal take on this is that, art taps into a part of myself that I don't get to actually use all that often in ministry. So, it's about wordless presence quite often. And so it's not about having to find all the right words or communicate the right ideas.
Sure.
Right? So it bypasses that and it finds a way into a part of our bodies and our minds and souls that may not often get expression.
Yeah.
I love your comment about, if you're not creating, you'll feel like there is something that's out of alignment or something wrong.
Yeah,
and my sense about that is that when we refer to burnout, we usually think sort of the default option is we're just working too hard, too many hours and so on.
Yeah.
I think burnout actually comes not from too much labor, although we can exhaust ourselves, but it's actually not engaging our energies in the right way.
Yeah.
And that's why I've heard people say over the years, if you don't create, if you're feeling inclined to create and you don't create, you'll get sick. And the sickness might manifest itself as an exhaustion or a frustration or an exasperation. And so sometimes it's actually about the way through burnout is through more energy expenditure, but doing the right thing.
Right.
And that's the key, because when people are doing something they really love and enjoy, they're out of it. They are just lost. The time flies by. we'd all like to have that experience more in the daily work that we do.
Right.
Right. That would be the great, when vocation and avocation line up very nicely with each other.
I'm a fan of it.
Right?
Yeah.
We want more of that.
That's great.
Not
And
less.
then you find yourself sitting in your office 11:30 editing going, whoa, how did that happen?
Right.
Oops.
I want to come back to your question in one other way. And this was through a very simple comment I heard from a woman who was a teacher of watercolor. And she was a remarkable teacher. But she said that, she had been part of a community of faith for a while, but had really kind of dropped out of it because she said there was no room for the visual arts in her faith experience as a community.
Really?
Just nothing really that was there. Huh. And she said that when she heard the words, "Let us pray," the first thing she wanted to do was to put color down on a page.
Oh, lovely.
And I think our instinct, right, is we hear those words and we think more words are coming. Right? Or maybe silence, but not color.
Not color.
Or not movement like dance, or not the sound of a hammer blow against a stone, right?
Yeah.
Why can't all of those expressions be prayer? So what we've done is we've taken this wide range of possibilities through the arts, and we've narrowed them down, it to this very, very tiny band of options. Right. So I think art and faith are critical to one another, because the more we engage the arts by looking at them, as well as actually participating in the creation of them, that we are broadening out that band. We're opening that door. Yeah. More feeling flows through that, more emotion, more depth. That's what we really are wanting to get
And I feel like as a church, we're over, I guess, probably the past century, church has become Sunday morning. Mm-hmm. Right. And faith sometimes feels very Sunday centric. Mm-hmm. And when we let it move and flow through those acts of creativity, and we acknowledge that and give that the time and care and space as a, for lack of a better term, or lack of a term I could think of, as a holy time, as a sacred time for yourself to be in an act of faith, I think it gives, it's a reconnection. Almost. It's a unifying of your whole self. Right. Into, as an intellectual person, and also as a person with creativity and hands and all that. So I'm also thinking about, how art as makers, but then also art as sort of receivers of art, right? So for those who will be coming to the exhibition opening at the end of the month, what can art do for us as we observe and absorb it?
Well, I think it's similar to something I was saying earlier, which is that as we observe it, it pushes us beyond what might be easily said. Right. And so we're an extremely word-oriented culture. We're using words right now to communicate, and there's a lot of joy and enjoyment that comes from that. However, I started having this experience some years ago when I kind of moved towards abstract art. I always thought, real art was that art that made it look like, you were looking at a sunset and you could practically put your hand out into the scene. But then when I moved away from that, what I discovered is that in abstract art, all art, in effect, has an abstract base because it's based on shapes. Sure. Right? And initially, those shapes look abstract, but some artists turn them into representational paintings. But there's something about looking at a certain shape that can itself have meaning. And we may not have a clue about why that is the case. Like, why is that shape seem to be speaking to me? Like, why is it making me feel what I'm feeling right now? Right. And I think that it's just as possible for the Spirit to communicate through those shapes, those wordless presences, as it is through any of the other arts that we, not more so or less so, but just the same. And I think that's what we can come away with when we're looking at art. Hopefully that might happen for some people when they're looking at the film and looking at the art that's there, that what are these shapes? How does this art make me feel? And it may be that people will look at some of the art and say, this doesn't really connect with me at all. And that's highly possible. Just as it's possible that it might, we might not connect with a sermon or a particular stained glass window. Many people say, oh, I love that. I think that's so beautiful. And we're thinking, it doesn't do anything for me, right? To me, that feeling only makes me want to push a little farther and say, well, are there images that speak to me? It may not be here in this room, but where are they? I think the reason that people will often say, or I have often heard it said, that, Pastor, I just have to be out in nature, right? Part of it is that it's the sights and the sounds and it's the shapes out there.
Ah, yes.
Right? Yeah. And we may not know why the shape of that particular tree trunk speaks to us, but we know that we like it and we want to be close to it. We might even go up and hug it, as long as we can be sure nobody's watching. So I think that that's what might happen as an experience of the film and the exhibition, that people will come into contact with art that's done in a certain way with certain materials, certain shapes, and just say, open yourself to that. See what happens.
It's almost like connecting us to our childhood. Observations of shapes and color.
Right.
I think about, in the summertime, we have family friends that will come and hang out around the pool, and we have like this gravel around the pool, and they spend so much time on hands and knees
rearranging the gravel
or picking out their favorite pieces and looking at them so closely, and then giving them to mom and dad because they want to bring home their very, very special rocks.
What a beautiful experience, right?
It's the coolest thing. I enjoy it so much. They're like, sorry, we're taking your gravel. I'm like, take it. That rock was never so appreciated as it was today.
I'm really glad you mentioned children in this regard, but have you ever seen a child, or maybe some of us might have a memory of having a crayon and just like really going at it on a piece of paper, right? And there's a red, then you grab another orange and you do that. And it's like you're grinding through. I mean, the paper eventually rips and splits, and there's all that energy in there.
Yeah.
And someone years ago asked me if I had ever heard of the artist Cy Twombly, and I had not. So I dutifully went off and got a couple books about him, and then eventually went to the Museum of Modern Art in New York, where they had a Cy Twombly exhibition. And the art of Cy Twombly looks notoriously like the art that gets created by children when they are just intensely doing that. But what you can see in his art is the same reckless, freedom, uncaring spirit that is often present in children when they create art. Yeah. And so when some people look at Cy Twombly's art, they're like, I think my child could have done that. Well, my first response, my response is, I hope your child can do that. I hope so, because that would show that energy of expression is there. And if someone says, I could have done that, I hope so.
Go for it.
Please do, because if it's possible that we can create like that, then maybe our faith life can be like that too.
Yeah.
And to me, that's the connector. Right? Okay. The energy that we're finding in that art and the energy that we're finding in that faith, if those are talking to one another, I think we got something really interesting going there.
I love that. That's so great. This is actually reminding me that I've had a lifelong goal, and I have a feeling I probably won't be able to start this till I'm like retired, but I've had this lifelong goal of making like a tapestry, but like a medieval.
Oh. Wow.
Like with a unicorn and the whole 9 yards. Wow. Every time I've seen them, I'm like, I really want to make one of those.
Castle in the background.
The whole thing. The whole thing. Maybe there's like a friar in the corner.
Of course.
With like a pint of ale. I'll have to work on it. But
isn't that great?
It's just reminding me. I'm like, oh yeah. About every 5 years, I'm like, oh yeah. I should really think about that. Do I know how to do it? No. I have no clue. I have no idea how one does that.
I think that I'm fascinated by those little inklings that come up. Like, where does that come from?
What?
Where's that around? But it's part of this upswelling of artistic energy that comes out of this, I think, this great shared reservoir, from which we can, it's a common well from which we can drink. Yeah. And again, it's wonderful to have that dream. Isn't it? I mean, just to think, I might do that tapestry one day.
Do that tapestry one day. Yeah.
And I think that's it. There's something that's so much fun just about thinking about it. Yeah. And, I can just remember members of my family when I was growing up, they would sometimes say, like half the fun is in the dreaming.
Sure.
And so that when you're thinking about that, again, here's another connection that if we're thinking about art that way, is there a similar feeling that we're having about the way the world might work? Right. And to think, one day I'm going to do this thing for the earth, or I'm going to do this thing for my neighbor, or this thing for my family member. And I think there are a number of obstacles we sometimes have to push through in order to get to that place. Right. It's all the internal voices that say, you could never do it. You don't know how to do a tapestry. What are you talking about? And, or you're just that one person, and really what difference can you make? And I think that those who have found a way to face off with those obstacles and have found a way gradually, slowly, but persistently to push through. The good news is we can push through. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And but that is such a wonderful moment when that energy wells up, whatever the project might be, and then just carries us forward until that time when we can really let go, give in, and go for it.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for joining us for this kickoff of Art Month. We hope you'll be able to join us on the 22nd here at Round Hill Community Church. You can find more information about the event at roundhillcommunitychurch.org or at edhorstman.com. There's a place to RSVP in both of those. It will all go to the same place. And so we look forward to seeing you there and interacting with you about Art Month.
You're here.
Thank you for listening. Round Hill Radio is brought to you by the friends and members of Round Hill Community Church. For more information, please visit roundhillradio.org.